Hey, deep fried neurons here. Uh, Before we start today's episode, I sort of have to contextualize this episode a little. I think I may have spoken about it in brief here and there, or like information about this might have come out while discussing something, but I think I should let you know that before deep fried neurons was even a thing, I was an intern at TIFA Working Studios, an art space located in Pune, the city that I live in. And at this place, I curated a certain show called Meme Regime. Basically, it was an argument to put memes as pieces of contemporary art in art galleries, and recording and writing the history of memes and the happenings in meme culture with the perspective of putting it in art museums down the line as pieces of contemporary culture in the 2000s and 2010s. Now, that was the intention behind the show, and thanks to 0821 Connect Mysore, Walk In Studios Bangalore, Todimil Social Mumbai, and Thus Critique Goa for helping us travel with the show over the year from 2018, late 2018 to early 2019. After that, I had to go to college, so we had to stop, unfortunately. But I'm not intending to stop the show altogether. Hopefully, if we get another venue and COVID ever finishes, we might do another show. And TIFA Working Studios was integral in making a facilitating job at an institutional level for the show and providing a platform for the show for the same. And and while I was in charge in quite a lot of decisions, the thinking process sort of was a collaboration with a lot of people who were working at TIFA at the time. And also, Musing is about memes, a popular video essay series, which if you haven't checked out, please go check out. On the channel is also a byproduct of meme regime, sort of in a video form. So I believe that TIFA has a huge role in that too. So I'm just saying, if you liked musing about memes, I'm definitely sure you wanted this episode. I know that there's a support on that series is huge. So I thought I should release an episode about this as well. Angus will introduce himself and I will stop yapping about this and get on with the episode. But before that, I should let you know that also the audio quality on this is a little poor because I record this a little time ago, and I was not sure how to release it because the audio quality was not up to mark. This was the first time of me recording, so it got a little awkward, but it is audible and I hope you enjoy it. Angus will introduce himself as soon as the recording starts. I'm just gonna cue the fucking. And with us, we have Angus. Angus, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi there. My name is Angus Joseph. I'm currently in South Africa. This is the country I was born in, but I do consider myself to be a citizen of the earth. And I worked with the Memetic Theory in the early 2000s when it was kind of emerging, and principally worked in I guess you would call it a marketing or advertising company within this kind of framework. But looking deeply at this kind of emergent idea of memetic theory and seeing how this fitted into a kind of marketing framework, which eventually, I guess, was the birthing process of what became known as viral marketing. And then since then, I have done many other kind of worked in many other industries and jobs, but the kind of framework of looking at information through the memetic lens has been it's deeply influenced the way I design things.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And I would actually like to start with like talking about your project as to like 325, the one that we talked about earlier. Could you just let our audience know about like what exactly it entailed and what were your findings? Like, how did you go about it?
Sure. So 325 was later in the program. So this was kind of maybe 2005 or 2006, and it was a investigation, I guess, in this process of viral marketing, which was really starting to open up. And I guess we could think about viral marketing as the kind of like the monetization of neural networks, the monetization of the people I know and the people I'm in contact with. And so we kind of had this idea of creating a brandless brand. So the question we were asking is, can we create brand loyalty to merely an image of a brand? In other words, the brand didn't sell anything or it didn't produce anything. It was literally just an image. And this was kind of sold to the client as part of a deconstruction program. So, so 325 was basically a deconstruction of this company's brand, and the idea was that we would create this kind of let's just call it a front, a mask, and at the right moment, once enough people thought, "Hey, that is pretty cool," we would take off the mask and reveal, "Hey, it's Company C. That's actually this cool bunch of guys."
Yeah, I mean, ever since you talked about that, I've been looking for examples of something like that happening.
Right.
And I came across something that my audience definitely is aware of. I'm completely sure because these kids talk about this all the time. Is Doki
Okay.
Doki Literature Club. Do you know about that? Doki Doki Literature Club?
No, no, not at all.
Okay, Doki Doki Literature Club was a game that was made available for free on Steam. And on the
Okay.
surface, it looked like any weeb game. I'm sorry for using that terminology, like an anime game.
Uh-huh.
And like just under the surface, it was a gory, existential, like this piece of art which lasted about 4 hours. And it was actually a marketing stunt for another game which they're making, which is more similar to like Far Cry and sorry, Devil May Cry 3.
Right. Right.
And I thought that was very interesting that like something like this has already happened, that a brand creates a mask of something, projects that, and then sells something else using it.
Sure. Well, my initial introduction into this was we had a company called Infectious Agents, and this was understanding this kind of again based on memetic theory, this idea that information is a contagion, that it's something that's contagious and wants to be contagious and wants to be transmitted through a community. Um, and the work that we did was actually in response to the restrictions placed on tobacco companies. Tobacco companies could now no longer do overt advertising. You know, they couldn't have
Mm-hmm.
their name on a Formula One car, for example.
Yeah, yeah,
And so they had all of this money, and this is kind of where our research began in kind of finding deconstructed ways to I guess represent a brand. Um,
yeah. Okay, got it, got it. I just want to make sure that we're not getting too ahead of ourselves. I sort of want to get into what is memetic theory. For people who are out of the loop, I'm just gonna give you what I know because it's very limited. It's that meme is a word for a non-genetic trope that passes on from one person to another, and it's usually a behavior, but it could be information, as Angus said. And it sort of maps this virality of a behavior pattern. That's what a meme actually is. And then in 2005-ish, when meme culture started to emerge, we adopted that word to understand it as an internet meme as we understand it now. And memetic theory is something that Angus can help us with. You know, take over from here.
sure, thanks. Yeah, just for the sake of making it simple for the let's just say the duration of this discussion, what we now know as memes, we can refer to that as internet memes. I think that would
Mm-hmm.
be quite useful because the word memes already has a meaning in this framework. Yeah. So look, um, um, memes are basically kind of based on the idea that imitation is the only way that we can learn, except for some moments of innovation. So
Uh-huh.
even language, we learn this by our baby voice imitating the sounds of the people around us in order to communicate. So a meme is essentially something that is imitated. And in the informational sense, this is basically information that's copied from one person to another. It's passed on from one person to another. Much like, again, much like, for example, the flu, all of
Uh-huh.
things that are infectious and can be passed on. And it usually takes a form. So there is like a piece of information, but that piece of information needs to be expressed in some way. So that is usually something like a whistle or a song, a melody. It could be a story. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is basically in memetic theory, a meme is something that can be imitated. We could also look at making fire as being a meme.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things that I came across in my research of like what the etymology of memes could be, then sort of my understanding boiled down to that everything is inherently and potentially a meme, and it's waiting to be recognized out there, uh, for the internet, for the sake of the internet, because that's where I come from. And furthermore, explaining this phenomenon is the book that you recommended to me yesterday. I've not finished it, and I promise I will. I'll do my homework. Uh,
Mm, mm,
is Susan Blackmore's Meme Machine.
sure.
So do you want to talk
Yeah,
about how like it explains the memetic theory and like meme being a wagon for information?
sure. Sure. Okay, so this is the part where it gets a bit super conceptual. And this is basically a lens. It's a way of looking at information or a way of telling the story of information.
Uh-huh.
And it basically it kind of says that a meme, which is a unit of, let's just say, idea or thought or information, is a replicator. In other words, its only job is to make another copy of itself. And it'll, if we look in the biological world, we find that the gene is the other replicator. It's the other uh, code that its job is to make a copy of itself.
Yeah.
So, memetic theory basically it says that information is a replicator, that it wants to be copied and continue. And it also makes the assumption that it follows its own evolutionary pathway. So, in other words, information is not something that we have captured and harnessed. It may actually be exactly the opposite way around. That, and this is what Susan Blackmore's book talks about, is how the the basically, I mean, I describe it as idea and matter kind of had a business meeting one day and said, look, let's work together and we can make the most fit creature. So the human with the ability to, or the precursor to the human with the ability to imitate became the obvious choice. And this basically, the result of this business meeting was a bigger brain, was more processing power to allow idea to duplicate itself and run its code out. And it would give the gene the advantage of being clever and the ability to make tools and technology and map and remember. And I mean, meme. It's interesting. It's the actual word itself might actually come from the three original muses, which was memory, song, and meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And so this really again goes deeply back to this idea of information as some sort of like suprahuman entity.
Um, I mean, what's I think the etymology of the word meme is Greek initially, which is also, I mean,
Yeah.
the word itself meant imitation or imitator. And then Richard Dawkins sort of defined it as we understand it today in 1976. So that definitely makes sense. I'm sorry, just let me
Mm,
lost my notes here. Yeah, we're back. So with Meme Machine, a parallel that actually confused me a lot, and this is just a tangent for the rest of the audience to enjoy. One of my favorite artists when it comes to memes is Pink Guy, who's an alternate of Joji. And he made a song called Meme Machine. If you get time, just go through it.
Sure,
And
sure.
if you can read the book while listening to the song, that'd be perfect. This is just additional
Yep.
information for the rest of you. Uh, the next I want to talk about is Memeplexes. This was an interesting one because we talked about grand narratives in this sense. Do you want to explain to your audience what Memeplexes are?
Yeah, so look, we're going to make a few assumptions here. We're going to assume that the definition of meme is true, that it is a replicator and that it does follow its own evolutionary pathway. So we now have these like tiny units of, let's call it culture, tiny units of culture that are floating around, and in order for them to survive, they start to form bodies of cooperation with other memes, with other ideas.
Uh-huh.
And we can think about this again, if we just think about it on the genetic level, we can kind of imagine how this might look. And so this is basically a memeplex is a collection of ideas that work together and strengthen each other. So
Uh-huh.
uh, religion is always such a good example to use because so many people can understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
Religion is a whole lot of like individual ideas that when they are held by belief together, they really strengthen each other. And so this is again, this could be, I guess, if we think about things like class division, even this could be considered a memeplex.
Mm-hmm.
Racism, ego. These are all kind of like ideas that all kind of cooperate together and form these kind of bodies. And even a kind of like the idea of ownership of corporate entity. The idea that a corporate entity can have rights. That is also an example of a memeplex.
Mm-hmm. Um, what's interesting about this conversation is like where I read it the first time, it resembles the grand narrative that postmodernist philosophy talks about. Uh, Jean-Francois Lyotard, in his book, like I don't remember the book's name, but he talked about grand narratives and religion, of course, being his prime example, is that there are a lot of small ideas that people already want to believe or have a tendency to lean towards, and then they integrate all of them in a larger idea, and that larger idea is the narrative in which all of it fits. And as long as there is a larger narrative, then people will adhere to it because consensus is how we find truth usually in society. And
Sure.
what's interesting to me is how these memeplexes interact. For example, religion is one memeplex that has been around for the longest time. But in the age of internet, we have the commentary against it, like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and like the four horsemen of of reason and the atheist
Hmm.
movement sort of found another ground-breaking space in the internet cosmos. Currently, uh, non-cooperation with the government is a huge memeplex which has found bits around the world, which like conspiracy theories. We talked about this yesterday. Um, Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, or the Tiananmen Square popularization, uh, the memes about police brutality. All of them are super popular. Like whether or not people are with the issue, they sort of still share the memes. Of course, you should be with the
Yeah.
issue, but
Yes. Sure. Sure. And I think a lot of it, a lot of these kind of like meta narratives are maybe not easy to see.
yeah.
So very often you are passing on by kind of like choosing to spread a meme. You are basically plugging into one of the meta narratives, uh, which could be a really well disguised anti version of itself. With the
Hmm.
idea of misinformation and disinformation, where even though I'm visually presenting A, the underlying message is actually B.
Okay, it's a bait and switch type of situation.
Uh, yeah, yes, and it can also be. I mean, it really depends on how deep the creator has how much the creator of the idea has invested.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and that sort of brings me to the next thing, like especially because you mentioned this, there could be meta narratives that could be disguised as misinformation. And we
Sure.
were previously discussing how two meta narratives might fight with each other. Uh, I want to talk about memetic warfare and how, like, if there's any light you could shed on it.
Sure. I mean, I think this is one of the hot topics at the moment, because we can all see how we are in the middle of something that's going on. Like I call it the info wars, and there is also a subcategory of that called the disinfo wars.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, these are all kind of being waged through ourselves as the battleground. We are now no longer the soldiers. We are actually the battleground of this kind of field, and our mind
Uh-huh.
is really enemy territory that's being colonized. But I mean, if you look at it, there's misinformation and disinformation. There's also propaganda. Um, there's sowing discord, which is a great technique which almost everyone has used at some point. Conspiracy theories, and then election interference. These are some examples of kind of how on this meta level we are being manipulated, or we are open to manipulation. In South Africa, we had an issue with a company called Bell Pottinger, and this was quite a
Uh-huh.
big thing where they basically were creating fake news and fake newspapers online to stoke up racial division in order to divert attention from corruption in the government. So again, this is it. It's Here's a narrative that's being presented, and even though some parts of it are true, its underlying reason is to divert your attention from something else. And then we look at Pizzagate. I mean, Pizzagate is quite a relatively recent one.
The one about
And
Hillary
then
Clinton running a pedophile ring. Hello?
Peter ring through a pizza place. Yeah, and this
Yeah,
was
yeah.
this was the reason why Pizzagate took off is because there was a instigation. There was kind of like an inference. There was a inference that uh, whoever was releasing the Pizzagate information was directly connected uh, to to Julian Assange.
Uh-huh.
So based on this assumption, a lot of this information was just accepted and spread. And then, of course, if we look at Cambridge Analytica and The Great Hack, this movie that's on Netflix, it's really good to watch.
Mhm.
We again see this kind of like we are in the middle of this information war, and our clicks are basically the ammunition.
Uh, Interesting that you bring that up and term it as InfoWars, because do you know anything about the actual InfoWars that exists?
You
Uh,
mean the Alex Jones channel? No.
yeah, that's the one.
Ah, uh-huh.
So Alex
Yeah.
Jones, Alex Jones was something of he was so ridiculous in his misinformation that it was popular for being ridiculous, but he had actual fans. Like people used to give him money for that shit. Uh,
Yep.
I
And
I
buy his
remember,
product.
yeah, buy his products. People used to buy like chicken bone dust from him.
Yep. Some like some weird health stuff. I don't know. Some sort of
Yeah,
scammy
yeah, very
products.
scammy, very shady, and he got kicked out of off of Twitter and YouTube and things like that. Until Joe Rogan gave
Sure.
him like a platform again, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting place to go this with. I sort of want to give our audience the framework of this in the context of 2016 election of America, because this is a time when Pepe, which is one of the most popular memes on the internet, sort of got co-opted as a symbol of National Socialism and Nazism. And they actually made an inference that Donald Trump is a descendant of Kek, the god of mischief from Egypt, whose reincarnation is Pepe. And this entire theory sort of took over, and like that's how they spread an actual meme about how Donald Trump should be a president. And of course, they used the confirmation bias that they had already against the Democrats to like uh, propel enough votes to get him to win. And I always thought that was one scary and two a very very big sign of how our echo chambers have closed in on each other, and we don't know how big the other sides are. And like you put it, like we're very much battlegrounds, in like our minds are battlegrounds in this state.
Sure. And remember, we're also now in this thing that they call the attention economy. you know,
Okay.
and for me, it's again to kind of bring it down to the internet meme. I think the internet meme is really such an interesting form, because it's a further layer of this kind of democratization of information, which you could say some of the key points was maybe the printing press, and then maybe the typewriter, because then that allowed like an individual to produce a book instead of
Uh-huh.
having a book printed by a central source. And now we suddenly have this means of, and we also have this kind of like a networked individualism, this kind of idea that I can make a meme and retain my anonymity just as much as I can put a tag on to say it was mine. I can also enter a piece of information into the stream, and once it gets copied and kind of added on to by a few people,
Hmm.
I can maintain my anonymity.
I mean, anonymity in on the internet is sort of considered very sacred, and of course, other people don't like the fact that it exists. There's both sides of the coin. Uh, but I do want to know, how do we bridge the gap? Like, do you think, because we're battlegrounds, of course, experiencing cognitive dissonance is the goal of any meme from the other side of the spectrum. So, do, would you happen to know how is it like that we come overcome the meme, or like recognize when it's you know bullshitting us, basically?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That is a tricky one. I mean, essentially, no, because we are kind of locked into a contract which says that Gene and Meme are working together.
Uh-huh.
And we also have now, again, to go back to Susan Blackmore, teams. This is her word, which is basically meme, but with the T at the beginning. And this is kind of where the internet meme comes in. And this is like the technology meme, And this is um, this is because before digital information transfer, if I wanted to tell you about an event, I
Mm-hmm.
would have to, from my memory or perhaps from a flyer, give you the information. But there is a chance that I might tell you the wrong date or the wrong time. So the
Yeah.
fidelity of information transfer was always subject to human error. But with technology, it's not at all. I mean, you just copy and paste, and you're pretty much guaranteed that the information in the text is gonna stay the same. So I think in terms of how do we deal with this, obviously critical thought is key, and it needs to be taught on all levels, from school kids all the way up. How to use logic and reason to think about things. And I think in terms of disrupting it, sure. I mean, there are ways to disrupt memetic information transfer.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about how society has broken some bad habits that it had before, you know, um, and that would be it's according to memetic theory. There's four stages that of the memetic cycle that go from stage one to stage four, and then immediately it's a cycle, so it goes back, and that's assimilation, and that is where the information gets into your head. There's
Mm-hmm.
retention, which is where the information is stored in your memory system. And then there's expression, which basically requires, if you put an idea in my head, it basically needs me to repeat it to someone, or write an article about it, or incorporate it into a dance movement that I'm doing, or change my own lifestyle. Um, and so if we can disrupt any one of these, sorry, and then the fourth stage is transmission, which is the memetic vehicle, and that is basically the book or the sound or the piece of artwork. So if we can disrupt any of these, then yes, it is possible to disrupt that flow. But I think the only way to really deal, especially when you think about the digital world, is kind of data-driven analysis. I really feel that data-driven analysis of being able to, for example, the success we're having with kind of detecting bots and figuring out their behaviors different from human beings, fluctuations, and then also proactive preventative systems. But other than that, no. I mean, I think we are pretty much in a war zone, and we need to equip ourselves and train ourselves and yeah, try and keep a hold of our minds.
I have two tangents that I want to explore off of what you just said. The
Sure,
first one, of course, is well, the data analysis that you spoke about, which is very constructive, and that's not a happy tangent, so I'm gonna get it over with really quick. It's
sure.
that I don't know if you know about the 2019 Indian elections and how Twitter was under a conspiracy for that, or like it was a battleground for that.
Right.
I don't remember the author's name, but she wrote a book called I Am a Troll, and
Okay.
she talked to a bunch of people who were insiders on the BJP IT cell, which is the ruling party in the country currently.
Uh-huh. Sure.
And basically, she found out that botting and creating divisive content, which would further confirm biases of a hateful group of the majority religion in the country, which is Hinduism, was a
Sure.
full-time job, and it was operational since 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of peaked towards the second election that BJP won, and it won by a landslide. So I sort of understand what you mean that misinformation and botting is sort of not avoidable at this point, but at the same time, if you equip yourself to understand it and sort of see it, then you can avoid it. You can let it not manipulate you. And the second tangent I want to take is a meme called Silence Brand. I don't know if you've heard it.
Okay. Yep. 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 Hmm.
Yeah, so basically, Silence Brand was this thing that came up because brands started to have a really good grip on memes to market their
Right.
products.
Of course. Sure.
And slowly but surely, audiences started to feel pandered to. And
Right.
like eventually, memes that are stronger than the brand's memes sort of emerged. And then those memes would overshadow the marketing campaign and it would result into negative marketing where people would actually stop buying the product. One of the examples
Sure.
of this, like one of the loser examples of this, not clearly related to this, is the Pepsi ad with Kylie Jenner.
Okay.
And I think in 2018, Pepsi made an ad with Kylie Jenner where they were protesting something with a diverse group of
Okay.
crowd, and they gave a police officer a can of Pepsi, and everybody celebrated.
Right. Yeah.
And it was very controversial because it supported nothing.
Uh-huh.
And when the BLM marches started in America again recently because of the unfortunate death of George Floyd, everybody still
Sure.
keeps mocking Pepsi and Kylie Jenner.
Yeah. Well, this is this is the thing about it. Once a piece of information wants to live and wants to be spread,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of has this habit of just doing that. Yeah, the thing is, like online services do not exist in a vacuum, you know.
Yep.
Um, and it's I guess there is some danger in over uh, taking like an overly academic view, or almost like an anthro view, which kind of separates or wants to put things in these like kind of defined boxes and stuff. Um, I think we've definitely seen that this kind of trend starts with trolling and then slowly graduates towards hate, or towards separation. Um, and so, I mean, I guess what the silence brand thing is really cool. I mean, this is also part of like, I guess, brandalism, which is kind of the vandalism of brands.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and that happens more on the streets. And I mean, here in South Africa, we also had a uh, company, I guess, a campaign, a thing that was called Laugh It Off, and this was basically
Okay.
brand deconstruction. Um,
Hmm.
and South African breweries, there was a very intense kind of logo deconstruction that they did of a popular beer that was, I mean, considering South Africa's history, it was really on point, but really quite rough. And the the company actually took these guys to the Constitutional Court, which is obviously our highest court, on the idea that their art and their actions was damaging the brand's reputation. And
Hmm.
interestingly, our Constitutional Court rules that there was still place for satire, and that's because they weren't lying. you know, it wasn't really. So I think we're going to watch, but with the potential is here for, let's call it, I don't want to say consumer power, but like people power, to really
Uh-huh.
switch the power balances. But that will mean a rejection of something and an adoption of something else. So that would kind of be the call for, I guess, an actual non-consumer culture. You know, um,
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah.
Um, it's
Other,
very
otherwise, somebody will always be buying what someone else is selling. So again, it's
true.
something we locked into contracting.
It's interesting that you bring up this switch between like uh, adoption of something and rejection of something for a change of that magnitude, because
Sure.
it's sort of those are two sides that are strongly emerging. I don't know if you know about hype beast culture. Hype beast culture sort of
It's so much
originated in
to learn.
America. I'm sorry.
I say so much to learn. Yeah, yeah. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So hypebeast culture sort of emerged in America, and now it's taking over the globe, and it's pretty strong in Indian cities. It's not reached the extreme of Indian like rural areas yet, but it will. I'm certain it will.
Sure.
Uh, the entire point is to buy streetwear that doesn't look expensive, has like the brand placement of certain brands,
Uh huh.
but it's just very
Uh huh.
expensive. And you and your friends will stand. I'm not even kidding. This is completely real. I am not making this up. Uh, and you and your friends stand around in a circle and you describe what product it is from what company and how expensive it is. And that's what young people spend their time with, like hours and hours of like just this price tag, that price tag. And it is, at least with 20-year-olds, it's very cringy and difficult to watch, but like with 16-year-olds, it's just sad.
Yeah, wow, that's almost wow, I'm trying to think. It's almost like on the level of the emperor has no clothes or something like this, It's like a complete inversion, and somebody is just laughing all the way to the bank, I can imagine. But like literally laughing.
No, they are literally laughing because Supreme, which is a company popular among these
Sure,
crowds, actually
sure.
made a T-shirt that's completely white, and it has the word sheep written on it. That's it. And people bought that
Wow,
shit. People bought a
sure,
T-shirt that says sheep in red,
sure.
and that's it.
This is really the society of the spectacle. You know, this
Uh-huh.
is where the image is considered more valuable than the object. I describe it as having a high quality print of a picture of an apple with an arrow that says tasty in this world is now considered more valuable than a bite out of an apple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Um, the other part
fascinating.
that the other part that I really need to mention so that the conversation is complete is that the counter of this is having products that are like useful and traditionally expensive brought down to like an accessible cost. So one of the most popular examples of that is Raycon.
Uh-huh.
A YouTuber made these wireless earphones that look like AirPods, but are more
Right.
comfortable and lighter, and about
Sure.
1/10 the price, less than 1/10 the price.
Sure.
And that's sort of a conversation that's happening on the internet currently, which I find interesting, especially in the realm of consumerism. Of course, there's so much more going on currently that is more important.
Sure.
And that's the end of everything I had to ask. If there's anything else you would like to add to what we've already spoken, go ahead. This is your time. You have free reign.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's fascinating. I mean, basically, our 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 feeds are really have really become objects of value,
Mm-hmm.
and that value can only be generated by humans. You know, we can't have like 20 billion bots all having fake conversations with each other and value being generated out of this, you know? So in a strange way, this isolation from truth is actually potentially driving us towards a truth, which is kind of the internal world, you know, that we're as people, we are the only things that have power. We are the only things, human energy is the only thing that can turn metal into a cup or
Mm-hmm.
into a screw, you know? And so I think we are going through this stages of this democratization of information. And yeah, our meme culture, what we choose to share, what we choose to create, step by step is all kind of creating the new story. So just to be aware and kind of invest in the kind of world that we want, I guess, and then we see what we choose as the consensus.
I know I'm making this outro with the luxury of pre recording, but I also have to let you know that the book that we talked about, the Memetic Theory book called Meme Machine, that Angus sort of introduced me to. I had not finished it at the time of the recording, but I have, and I just have to give a fair warning. I now intend to lean towards agreeing with Paul, who's a friend of mine and was a panelist at Meme Regime Bangalore, that there is a bit of an unlearning that you have to do when you get into hardcore mimetic theory after reading that book. It is, after all, a popular science book, but it is an accessible point. It is not a bad place to start, not the worst place to start, but I am telling you that don't um, completely learn it as an absolute concept. I would suggest that give some room for unlearning, or take it with a grain of salt. But that's a little too harsh a statement for it. But definitely keep room for unlearning if you plan to learn mimetic theory on a more hardcore level. So, but definitely the book recommendation stands. It's not a bad book to start at all. Beyond that, please go check out TIFA Working Studios website. They have a ton of curation done over the last 6 years, and suggest what you want to see from them. After which, I would recommend you also support me on Patreon, because I've been doing decent content. If you really find the content worth it, please support me on Patreon. DM me for merch. There is a merch post link down in the description. Maybe I'll make a website eventually. And along after that, like, share, subscribe, share it shamelessly. Let your friends know I'm doing this, and have a nice